complex. And there's two important discussions in that agenda item. And then we also have the solar Jack Cogswell building discussion, and then any other business. Is there any other business that we need to talk about, Steve Hopper?
I think there's a few invoices on Rosemary that we need to approve at the end.
Okay, because I only have public safety invoices. Oh, oops, hold on. Yeah, I got two
There
invoices.
should be two at the bottom.
Two on that. Okay, let me just make a note. Great.
Stuart, I sent out an email on Friday night with all the info. So, okay.
Right, I've got the list of invoices. I didn't see it's kind of on the bottom, but I have.
All right, terrific. Thank you.
All right, great. Okay, any other items for the other business, you think?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, all right, good. All right, well, then let's start the first agenda item, approve the minutes. Do I hear a motion to approve the last meeting minutes?
I'll move that we approve the meeting minutes of last month.
And do I hear a second?
Second.
Thanks, Richard. Okay, any questions, any edits, issues?
No, I think I'm going to need to abstain on the vote because I don't think I was at that meeting.
Okay. All right, so then we'll go for roll call. So Richard?
Aye.
George?
Aye.
Erwin?
Aye.
Stewart's and I. Roy was out of that last meeting. Okay, great. So that's to approve the minutes. So let's bring in the user community for the public safety, if we can, and we'll kick off. And you'll lead that, Ken. We basically have two topics there. We have, well, three: the status update, the invoices, and then we need to discuss the funding topic,
Right.
relative to the request that we've made over time, and we need to have a discussion around that, given what the FinCom's position is. So there's three topics. So I'll turn that to you, to Ken, once everybody's here.
Everybody in, Steve?
Yes, I'll wait for the chiefs, but Keith and
Okay.
Miles are in.
Okay. All right, we'll start with the schedule update. The phase 2 basement slab has been completed, poured and cut. They've loaded some block down there, and we'll be working on that going forward. Building steel is essentially complete, with the exception the building itself. The sally port still needs to be done, and then the screen wall steel on the roof. They continue to work on site utilities. They completed the block in the Sally Port area, and they've been backfilling that area this week. Over at Fire Station 2, the apparatus bay infill is complete. MEP work continues, lower level, upper level, main level. It's an ongoing zoo over there with all that stuff. They've been working on the brick on the exterior, and the AVB in the main roof is complete over there. We're still on track for substantial completion in October, November of this year, and PD in January, February of next year. Any questions about status? Okay, the ACL. A few new ones this year, a couple of credits, drain line for the shower, some patio rail modifications over at Fire Station 2, and wall face revisions over at Fire Station 2. Again, the big unknown is still that temp facility restoration. We're waiting on one final price from Modulease, the trailer people, to see what they're going to take back, if anything, in the trailers, or if we're going to have to rip everything out from there. Other than that, the other stuff I think is most is carryover. Does anyone have any questions on the ACL? All right, I guess we can move into the voting items then, Stuart.
Okay. And I'm just seeing what you've got here relative to the list I have. So it's better to go after the
How about
first, right?
Yeah, however you want to do it, doesn't matter. I'll scroll to follow along.
Sure. But is there any particular one that needs, no, it looks like it's all general. So
No,
I'm going to suggest based on your list, Catherine, which is the requisition 27, Consigli Construction through March 2021. So I put forth the invoice, the requisition 27 for $1,666,978.23 coming out of the general contracting budget. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Thank you, Richard. Any questions? Hearing none, coming to the vote. Richard,
Aye.
George,
Aye.
Irwin,
Aye.
Roy,
You're on mute, Roy.
Yeah, I know. It took me a while to find it. Aye.
okay, great. Chief Schlittler,
He's not, he's here. Chief, you're on mute.
Chief Schlittler, you're on mute. If you could, I can see the video come up. I can't see him.
Might be having technical difficulty.
Yeah. So the vote, just waiting for your vote, Chief Schlittler, if you can.
Can you put up his thing, thumbs?
Did he?
thumbs up.
Do we see a thumbs up? Okay. I can't see him, so I'm hoping that record that. I do not see Chief Condon, but we have a sufficient number to pass this. Agree? Okay. All right, so I'm going to go to the next two invoices from the architectural budget. So putting forth two invoices, both from Castle Booze. One is for March 2021 services for $17,930, and the second one for March 2021 service traffic signals for $1,468.94 for a total of $19,398.94. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Thank you, Irwin. Any questions? Hearing none, coming to the vote. Richard,
Aye.
George,
Aye.
Irwin,
Aye.
Roy,
Aye.
Chief Schlittler.
Aye.
Excellent. Okay, great. I don't see Chief Condon. Okay, so we're good. All right. There's a next batch of invoices all coming out of the miscellaneous budget for a total of $15,678.06. I'm going to just read them off as one total. Is there any objection to grouping them together? Hearing none, I'm going to go through them. Okay, so a PODS invoice for $114.99. That's a rental. A second PODS for a different location for $114.99. A generator rental from Milton Cat for $2,612.50. A Needham Police Detail for School Street for $178. That's for the March 5th. The next invoice from police is for School Street as well for $934.50. And on another date in March, there's several invoices here for police details, all in March. So I'll continue down. Next one is for Westwood Police for $859.04. I believe I missed one, which is $534 for Needham Police. The next one is Westwood Police for $429.52. Next one is Westwood Police for $429.52. These are all School Street. There's the Norfolk Sheriff's Office for Police Detail and Fire Station 2 for $206. There is an invoice for UTS of Mass for February-March materials testing on Fire Station 2 for $2,505. Another UTS of Mass February-March materials testing on the Chestnut Street location for $1,040. The remaining three invoices are all from Rist Frost Shumway. One is the Feb commissioning services for the Public Safety Complex, $1,609. Next one is for March commissioning service of the same, $1,471. And And the last invoice from Risk Frostway, March commissioning service for Fire Station 2 for $2,640. All those invoices, again, coming from miscellaneous budget, add up to $15,678.06. Do I hear a second?
Seconded.
Thank you, George. Any questions on those numbers of invoices? Hearing none, coming to the vote. Richard,
Aye.
George,
Aye.
Irwin,
Aye.
Roy.
Aye.
Chief Condon. Chief Schlittler.
Aye.
Chair is aye. Okay, I believe that's all the invoices, Ken?
Yes, sir.
Okay. That takes care of 2 of the 3 topics. Now we come to
We still need to
the,
do this.
No, there's still
We still need to do the change order.
There's a change order there.
Hey, Ken, this is last month's change order they're showing. This is 26.
Oh, I thought I popped up the right screen. Hang on, I grabbed the wrong one. Because I sent out a new one. Because I had the wrong one on there.
okay, change order, great. I didn't have that on my list here, thank you. Do you have the right one up?
Yeah, I should be able to find it. Hang on.
Okay,
This-
The change, Stuart, the change order is way at the top. 56,000.
oh,
Or
yes, thank you.
55,000.
Okay, some reason it didn't render on my iPad here. Got it, 55,669,
And it's change
number
order
27.
Correct.
Do you have that, Ken?
I do. I'm just trying to find it.
Okay,
Going back
Let's
and
give-
forth between my tablet and my computer at work is gets a little
we'll give you a
funky.
minute.
When did they send that out? The end of the day, Friday.
The
After-
CRs that are deployed, that are shown are correct. It's just the total, that's change order 27 at 50,
So the CR is 417 through 448 is correct, Steve?
that's right.
Okay,
There it is. Can you see? Can you see that on my screen?
I
Yes.
can just see, we can see the list, Ken. And instead of change order number 26, it should be change order number 27 for
Yeah,
55.
but do you see? Okay, hang on a sec. I gotta.
No, we can't.
669.
We can't see it yet.
Okay, hang on. Hang on.
If you aren't able to pull it up, we can
I
at least
can. I
work-
can.
Okay,
I just gotta get to the right share screen. That's all.
okay.
Why isn't it going back to share? All right, let's do it this way.
Now try it.
Watch me pick the wrong one again. There we go.
Okay. So you want to just walk quickly through the top items above 10,000?
Yeah, the first one is the site entrance modifications. That's the changes we made to the various entry and exit gates. Required some modification of the sidewalk and the curbs. The next larger one is mechanics bay revisions. PD asked for things in their mechanics bays, water reels, hose reels, outlets in different places. And those are the only 2 that are over 10K.
10,000, okay. Does anybody have any questions relative to this list? There are a couple credits.
What did we change with regard to the curtain wall? That's about a $10,000 change too. What changed there, Ken?
Keith, you want to explain that one?
Sure. You guys can hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
So the stair landings had a ACT ceiling that concealed the mechanical spaces, but the curtain wall outside was all glass. So you would have been able to see the inside of the lights and the wires and whatnot. So we readjusted the height of the curtain wall a little bit and we changed the small sections to spandrel glass. And then to make sure everything aligned, we realigned the metal panels that came up against the curtain wall also, so that everything would look intentional.
Okay. All right.
Okay. So I'll put forth this change order for approval. Change order number 27 for $55,669. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Thank you, Erwin. Any further questions? Hearing none, coming to the vote. Richard,
Aye.
George,
Aye.
Erwin,
Aye.
Roy,
Aye.
Chief Schlittler,
Aye.
and the chair is aye. Okay. Any other voting items, invoice change orders, pay apps? We good?
I think we're good.
We're good.
I did have one quick one if I could get it in. Can,
Go ahead, George.
the COVID costs, are those changing at all? I mean, this one has a $8,370 in charges. Are we seeing, as we continue with this building, we see those reducing at all?
No, we'll actually see them going up. If you recall, during the summer last year, we had some pretty sizable ones on a monthly basis. And that's because the standards from the state require us to wipe down surfaces, clean door handles, a whole gamut of things. Right now, we don't really have a building that we're cleaning. We're just doing the basics of cleaning the trailers, cleaning the porta-johns, supplying water, PPE, that's it. But as the two buildings get more enclosed, you start hanging doors, you start putting up millwork and things like that, that number will ratchet up because we'll be spending more in labor for the cleaning.
And that's all in your anticipated cost log estimates?
Correct. What I do is I just take off the actual every month, George, and however many weeks we have left, I maintain that $4,000 a week for the number of weeks left. So now we've got 30, after March, we had 39 weeks left. So the ACL was 4,000 times 39 weeks.
Okay.
Okay. All right, with that, those two items closed out, we're going to get to the next and final item of the public safety, and that is the funding topic. I did send out an email with some information that Steve and team put together. Not everybody on the call received some of that information, but what we'll do now is put that information in front of us. I think it probably makes sense for Steve or Ken to go through it. I would like to preface it, if I may, is that we are at a discussion point right now because the FinCom has not rebutted, but they do not accept the 1.7 that we had voted on in our previous meeting, 2 meetings ago, I think it was, where we took the insight from Steve and Ken and team in terms of the fund shortage relative to this project. What was the dollar amount that we would put forth to the town or put forth to Kate and the select board for the money that's needed to finish this project out? You'll recall that we had many discussions starting back in June and July in terms of the run rates, in terms of what we think the cost of the soil and the COVID. And the previous meeting or 2 meetings ago when we voted the 1.7, we felt that was a number that would support this project to completion. That number has been reviewed with the select board. The select board supported it in the discussions at the chair meeting, and it was presented to the FinCom within the warrant. It is printed in the warrant article for 1.7 million. The FinCom has not voted on that. And just as you know, in town meeting, the FinCom will vote every warrant article in their own meetings to come out with a position at town meeting. So every warrant will have a position from the FinCom. It'll either be a position of favorable, a position of against it, or no position at all. In this relative warrant article, this is $1 money. This is a big concern. It seems to be a big dollar amount. They do not agree with our mathematics, if I can simplify it that way. So there's a couple things that could happen if that number stays as is. When we go to town meeting and the select board presented, they are the proponents of the 1.7 million article to put it on town floor to vote it. A couple things could happen. I don't want to have this discussion determine what that will be. What I think we have to contend with tonight is that the finance committee does not believe the mathematic, the 1.7 is the right number. They think it's a substantially less. We do not have a number from the FinCom specifically that says they will support X number. Just because they don't support the number does not mean it can't go to town meeting. It's the town meeting that actually votes the number, but it could get contentious. So the hope tonight is that we re-review our numbers and see whether we could actually compromise between some number less than 1.7. When we did the 1.7, we took the 1.45 that Ken and team came up with, and we added approximately 150 to 200,000 extra contingency on top of that. We did not want to put further risk in this project of having to slow down. We have a long history of running these projects. We love to give money back. We don't want to spend money. We've been very diligent in terms of what we've done, in terms of change controls and everything else. But in order to keep this project moving, and what the soils did and the COVID did, they've put a pinch into the contingency. We're just trying to help this project get to the end line, and we hope we'll give money back. But having said that, what is our focus tonight is the scenarios, and I have, yeah, okay, you got it up there, great. Ken put together some scenarios. If you look at the 1.45 column L, I'll just walk through that, and then I'll turn it over, Steve and Ken. But if you take the funding, the 1.45, we believe we have an ACL of 647. If we take the March CO, which we just basically approved, it's rounded up, you have a remaining budget of 747. If 1.45 million comes back into the contingency, we would have $747,000 to work with to manage this project to the end. We know we're going to have change orders. It's inherent in this complex project. The run rate that we could cover with a 1.45 is 83,000. If you look at row 16, I think that's where our discussion needs to take place, is that the funding amount less the ACL, less the March change order, leaves us an amount of money that we can work to manage this project to completion. So with the run rate on column L, you could see that we might just end up with negative $300, rounded numbers. The question is, can we go lower than the 1.45? And I think the challenge we have is that if we start to go down in the number, we do run the risk of running out of money, but we do have a special town meeting that we could go to in October. So the question is, could we actually support this? You know, if people really want us to put a number together that just gets us to October, November, covers the project, and then go back to special town meeting again and get additional funds, we could do that. I don't think that's a good strategy for everybody involved, the town, the FinCom, and everything else. I think we should just put the bucket of money in there. Can we go to the 1.3? Now that's been highlighted in red because that may be the number that we could go to. If we start to go to 1.2 to 1 million to 750, I think we are faced with a project shutdown of some portion. And the lower the number it is, the more quickly we have to make a decision. With that, I'll open it up to Steve and Ken just to maybe clarify anything more, but I would open up to this committee and hopefully structure this conversation to see if we can go to a lower number than when we had in the previous vote.
Let me just give you a little history of where the funding numbers come. We had a meeting with Kate and Dave Davison, Steve, Stuart, and myself last week, and Dave mentioned that in his conversations with John Conley, and there was no backup to this, the numbers had just been thrown. At one point, he said 1.2 million seemed like a reasonable number. At another point, evidently, it was said 750,000 to $1 million. So that's the genesis of those numbers. Using those numbers, you can see what the math supports. The 1.5 is what we had come up with originally in our discussions last month. Steve and I, in talking today, we put the 1.35 in because that is within $10,000 roughly. If you take the COVID or what the anticipated COVID was originally, it's actually a little less than that now because we've been spending less. Plus the soils, that came out, I believe the actual number was 1.364. And arguably that's the easiest number to defend, if you will. Listen, all we're asking for is the COVID and the soils make us whole in the contingency, and we're good. Steve and I are comfortable with that almost $72,000 run rate. We've been, as you saw this month, it was 55,000. Last month was higher, but it had an ACL number in it. Last month's number was probably between 30 and 35,000 of, I'll just say, new items. And then the month before it was a relatively low number too. So unless something really comes up and bites us, we think we can make that 72,000 a month work. And again, the 1.35 is the math's the easiest. There's no math, if you will. It's just make us whole from what COVID and the soils took away from us, put that back in the kitty, and we'll go from there.
So the reality is the run rate, the row 16 is the number that really I think is in question, is whether this project team can work with that run rate or not.
Yeah, if I can add on to what Ken just said. As the project matures, the run rate is dropping and has shown to drop. Over the last 3 months, we're averaging around 50,000. That's indicative of the fact that the run rates has been dropping. Back last July, when this first came up, when the issue of needed funding for the project came up, we had used an 80,000 run rate as a target at that time. We're now 9 months beyond that, and we're finding, as we would expect, the run rate is dropping, and that is a conservative, that 72,000 appears to us as a conservative number. And in our discussions, we believe we have enough to complete the job with a cushion, with a buffer, if we fund or get a supplement amount of 1.35. Now, the other point that I want to make is, if for whatever reason we get into a debate as to what the proper funding level is, we entertain the possibility that we're confusing folks as to the funding level, and town meeting could potentially table the whole thing, and we wind up with no funding level at this time, a funding level to be determined in October. Well, if we get into, as Stuart had said, a situation where we don't get funded, we are driven by the fact that we have to continue with some run rate going forward, and we have no funding for it, in which case we have to conserve funds that have already been committed under contract. And in so doing, we determined that the only practical way to get those funds is to essentially shut down Fire Station 2. Now, shutting down Fire Station 2 is dramatic, and we have actually ballparked some numbers that would cost the town if we were to shut down Fire Station 2, and those numbers are significant. They are in the ballpark of about $1.5 million. They include demobilization, they include rental costs to keep Fire Station 2 at Hillside over a year's length. And then they include costs for remobilization. All told, that's in excess of $1.5 million. So aside from other issues that would significantly affect everybody, that expenditure and the closure of Fire Station 2 is something we want to avoid at all costs, in my opinion. So my feeling is we've been backed into a position where we need to take a hard look at the run rate, at the projected costs. And I understand there's the position of a number of you folks. Well, you know, we will return any money that we get. Why not stick with the 1.7 or something between 1.35 and 1.7? That just adds additional conservatism on the cushion, and we'll return that money. The issue in my mind is we don't want to be on town meeting floor with a debate on what the right number is, with the possibility that no funding gets approved. So we've taken the approach, or at least I've taken the approach with Ken, what is a reasonable number that gives us still a conservative outlook on the closure of the project that we feel we can live with and should live with to complete the project. And that's the 1.35 million that is boxed in this exhibit.
George, you have your hand up? George?
My turn?
Yep.
Okay, well, I have a few comments. One in particular is there something?
Got some feedback. If people could go on mute.
Okay to talk now?
Try it.
Try again. It's getting feedback through something.
Yeah, there you go, George. Go ahead.
Okay. The first point I want to make is we approved 1.7 million. So we first have to come away from that and say, well, I guess we screwed up and we were too conservative, so we're cutting back from 1.7. And the committee has to decide that. Second thing is, I think we need to give town meeting a little more credit than we're giving them. If we say to them, if we approve 1.2 million, by the way, it's going to cost you another $1.5 million because we're going to have to shut down Fire Station 2. Nobody in that room wants to shut down Fire Station 2. Nobody's going to vote for something that's going to require us to possibly shut down Fire Station 2. And if we get less than either 1.45 or 1.35 million, there's a chance that we'll have to shut down Fire Station 2 construction. In my opinion, if we present that to town meeting and say, we need this dollar amount, and if you give us less than that, we're going to have to shut down Fire Station 2, and it's going to cost you an extra $1.5 million. There's nobody that's going to vote for that. Okay, that's my opinion, and I really believe that they're smart enough to recognize that if you give us what we're looking for now, you won't have to pay that extra $1.5 million. Everybody understands that in the room, even though they're not in construction. I'm sure all the town meeting members know if you shut a project down and then restart it, it's going to cost you more. And we can tell them it's going to cost them about $1.5 million more. I don't believe that's going to create any kind of controversy that's going to require them to say, oh, well, let's just skip this and wait until fall to do this. That's not the way that town meeting operates. They do have a lot of judgment and things like this. It's not as if we can wait until the fall on some of these numbers. And I think we need to be right up front with them about that, that certain numbers will require us to say, okay, it's going to cost you this much more if we shut that project down. Okay, we've got to be right up front with that. That's the first major point I want to make, is that we need to do that. Second thing is that we need to also justify to the committee needs to agree that we're not going to stop coming down from 1.7. We've got to come down to 1.45, which was the number last month before we added the contingency onto it, and that it's still acceptable to accept less than that with no contingency. Essentially, we're saying not only get rid of the 200,000, but let's get rid of $300,000, which would put us in a position where we have a run rate of, what is it, 55,300. I'm sorry, 71,900. It'll give us 71,900
Correct.
with no contingency beyond that, none. So essentially, if we go with 71.9 and we end up with about 55,000 a month, which is about where we are now, 50,000 a month, it'll give us 20,000 a month over the next, 8 months? That's only $160,000 that we'll have left, if any of that. My point is, that's a very low contingency amount, even as you approach the end of the job. We all know that coming up to the end of the job, there are always going to be issues that we don't know about. If we end up with zero, we're going to look like we got egg on our face again.
Keep in mind that the hillside restoration is a big number right now, and I think people are thinking that that number doesn't belong with us. I don't want to debate that tonight because it is part of us. That's something we've raised in terms of an obligation, but I don't want to go into that. I just want us to recognize that it's sitting there, and that's a big chunk of what could be eating up the contingency or may not. So,
But a big part of that restoration has got to be done. Stuart.
I
A
understand.
big part
Joe.
of it has
But
to
Joe-
do with getting the building operating for Fire Station 2.
Correct, but what I'm saying, George, is that we have a risk. We don't fully know what planning board and everybody else is. So I think it's not appropriate that anybody outside of this committee and this project team should say that the town will be fair and just take it off our plate. Until it's formally taken off, we have a risk there. That's all.
But no, some of that money, Stuart, is associated with moving stuff from Fire Station 2 temporary to Fire Station 2.
No, I
Is
understand that.
KBA
but the rest-
still on the line
No,
here?
hold on, George. All I was saying was just to be clear, the restoration, once Fire Station moves out of its temporary, we have to break down the hillside and we have to put it back to some condition. That's the number I'm saying. That's still a risk factor. We don't have the answer to that. Until somebody takes that off our plate, we have to have that as a risk factor.
But that's not the 647.
It's the
Stuart, if I
400.
could just interject, part of that 647,000, a little over 400,000 of it is stuff at Hillside that we absolutely positively will have to do regardless of the planning board.
Okay,
Exactly.
all right. Right, okay.
An additional, we estimate roughly 120,000 that if planning follows through and says, no, you've got to put it back the way you found it, then that's over and above that.
Okay,
But the
so there's still
400
risk there.
That,
And I see you, Erwin. I cut in front of you, Erwin, so I apologize.
that's the risk. 120 is the risk. But
Fair
the
enough.
405 we've got to do in order to clear out the tent and the trailers so that they can go back and we don't incur additional rental costs.
Right, so there's actually a higher risk cost sitting there. So George, are you all set with your comments?
So far, yeah.
Okay, Erwin.
I've got a number of things and I'm just going to say a few of them because I think we need to have other people contributing. I agree with most of what George said previously. The only thing I would caution, and it's all about the presentation at town meeting, you don't want it to come across as a threat that even though it's going to be the reality that Fire Station 2 could be shut down. I think it's all how you frame that discussion. Just make town meeting aware, here are the ramifications of different amounts of money that are being asked for. That's just a minor point because I agree substantially with what George said, but we just don't want it to come off as a threat to town meeting. Then I just have a few questions. Exactly what was the math problem that FinCom had? And what's the extent of negotiation, if any, that we will still have with FinCom? Or are we going to put a number out? And then if we put out 1.35 or 1.45 and FinCom is looking at 750,000 to 1 million, they're going to come up with something between those two numbers that I just said. And then we're going to be back into the 1.2 range, which is not where we want to be.
Can
So
I-
I guess I want to know what the process is going forward, because I think what Steve Popper presented is reasonable. I'd also like to, thinking ahead in any presentation, and this is part of the COVID era, but I like what the CDC does with the rolling average. And I think if you present, let's say, what our burn rate is over a 6 to 9 month period with a rolling average, you really get a good trend line. And then you'd have a good case to make. Look, the trend line is about 50 to 60,000 a month. Therefore, it's very reasonable for us to be asking for the 1.35. So a couple of comments, and I just have some questions again about what's the next steps regarding a negotiation with FinCom, if any.
Let me add a couple clarifications there, Erwin, you asked. My read from being in the FinCom meeting and us presenting is that there was two concerns. One is that we had a contingency balance in the first place, and that contingency was only for ultra things coming out of nowhere, instead of sort of understanding how we manage the project with this kind of complexity. And that the amount of money that was in the contingency is sufficient. And more importantly, that the contract that was signed was for delivering the building as designed. So there should be no change orders. And that the calculation I can't answer for, but there were some calculations that came up with 750 to 100 to $1 million. And it's not clear to me why they came up with a lower number than the COVID and the soils cost combined, which are about 1.3 plus. Steve, anything you want to add to that to help Erwin answer that question?
I share that comment. I think what I heard at the FinCom discussion was that they also felt, as we do feel, that the burn rate on changes should be dropping as we go through the maturity of the project. And that has been part of what we have tried to look at. And we are at the threshold now of 50,000. We believe that's even going to go down as we move forward. We've stated all along that some of these changes that have occurred are changes that we essentially foresaw affecting both police headquarters and Fire Station 2, and they were accounted for at the time and have been absorbed now as changes in the project. So those are not reoccurring changes that we're going to see on the project. We are continuing to see, and I use the word gaps, between the construction drawings and the actual deployment or implementation in the field. And those are what is causing the dribbling effect of changes, which we absolutely need to account for in order to get a fully functioning facility. But I don't believe that those changes are going to occur at the level that we had seen them back last July, which was the 80,000. So FinCom did make that comment that they expected it to, they use rough numbers. They sort of had a straight line. They were using examples which were not practical, but they did indicate that they felt that the changes should be coming down. And we are seeing the changes coming down. So that's why, that's what has prompted us, in all due respect, it is a number that's more defendable in that it is the cost of the contaminated soils and the COVID costs, but it also reflects that we are coming down. And if we're coming down at 50, if we're at 50,000 now, and even if we stayed at 50,000 till the end of the project, that would be a cushion essentially of 20,000 times 9. So it's $180,000 that we would see as a cushion if we were to accept the 1.35.
Erwin, does that help answer your question?
Yeah, just the, I guess, in the negotiating strategy, because my concern is if we ask for 1.35 and FinCom comes back, oh, let's meet in the middle, then we're in the funding zone that we don't want to be in. So I guess I'm just curious if we all agree as a committee that the 1.35 is what we would be asking for, how do we best ensure that there's support? And if not, then I agree with George that we'd have to make the case. And I think we should then try to make the case to convince town meeting that this is appropriate.
Before I go to you, George, I just want to respond to Erwin's, if I may. So Erwin, the process is that right now a fact sheet is being put together. It's going to be reviewed tomorrow. Steve, Dan Matthews, who I believe is going to be the proponent for the select board, Kate, and in terms of why we're asking for the money, et cetera, et cetera. So the process, I believe, is going to be the fact sheet, the FinCom discussion, and hopefully they'll support it. I think, but anyways, I hope that answers the process and sort of the pieces. And I would like to hear from the other committee members in terms of before a motion gets put on is if there's questions. And George, your hand is up.
I'd like to hear from other members of the committee that haven't spoken yet.
I agree. Richard or Roy?
Sure, I guess I'll go first. I was thinking about the COVID and oil reimbursement, shall we say, to make the project whole, and I really do believe that those are non-negotiable. We have to be made whole on both of those fronts. Neither was anticipated. Clearly, the oil was caused by the town, and therefore the town should make the project whole. And as far as COVID is concerned, again, that was unforeseen. I would note that it's possible that FinCom is also thinking about potential restitution to the town from the federal level, but that remains to be seen as to how that will translate. And of course, that could be many, many months from now, would not help the project. So I firmly believe that we have to stand our ground on those two items. I'm very concerned about the 1.450 figure, I think was mentioned as no contingency, no additional contingency. That's a risk that I think is really something that is hard to swallow. I would note that just because FinCom says no, even if they represent that to the town meeting, does not necessarily mean that the article is doomed. I've seen FinCom overridden in the past, and it could very well be again. I think it's all, as Erwin said, it's all in the matter of the presentation. And I do agree also with Erwin's comments that I think we'd be bidding against ourselves if we start going down the path of too low a figure now and then wait for the FinCom to meet us halfway through. I don't think that makes a lot of sense. I think we have to have faith in ourselves. If we believe that this is what we need to carry this project to conclusion, to avoid having to shut down any portion of the project, then that's what we need to come up with as our final figure to present to town meeting.
Can
Thank
I
you.
just
Roy?
interject before we go to Roy? Just one thing, Richard. We do have a contingency. At least we're projecting a contingency with the 1.35, and that is we're projecting $180,000 of additional contingency, because I don't see us moving beyond the 50,000 burn rate.
Thank you.
Roy?
Sure. What was the number that we approved last time? They didn't like,
1.7 million.
so I'm comfortable reducing that number based on new knowledge that we have, which is what, Steve presents to us. I am uncomfortable going any place further than that. I don't, I apologize, I just don't get it. It's our job to do what we recommend for the success of these projects. I realize this is a lot of money. I realize we run into a lot of things. So I'm not comfortable supporting, I like to have, I think there's still unknowns that can happen. So the 1.35, I think still is, Steve said there's an extra 180,000 in there. At the point we are in the project, do we feel comfortable with 180? If Steve says so, then I will believe him. I would, as the project owner, if I was the project owner, I would want more flexibility. I always do, but I understand this is the town's money. But so I'm uncomfortable going any further than that. So I think whatever we need to do, we need to be clear on it. Somebody has to tell me, did we get a clear reason? Did they do any math that just explained to us why they were uncomfortable with the number, or they just were uncomfortable with the number?
They're uncomfortable with the number.
That's not acceptable to me. So I won't support. I'd like not to go below the 1.45, but I wouldn't support anything below the. I'm part of this group, and I will listen to each of you, but I wouldn't go below the 1.35. I won't support it.
George, your hand is still up.
Yeah, I think that it is a dangerous path to try to negotiate with FinCom. Number one, we have a basis upon which we're making our decision. Until I see FinCom come up with a basis for why they made their decision, I consider it just nonsense. I really do. I could use a worse word than that, but I consider it nonsense. All it is pushing just for pushing. I want to see from them specifics. Why do they think they can get it done for $750,000? And in a way, I'd like to call their bluff and say, okay, you guys finish it for that. And let's see what happens. I don't think they could. I think they would make a mess of it. And that's not what this is about. It's about finishing a project that's a $70 million project that should be done in the same way we've done all projects, and we should have a reasonable contingency. If Steve says it's going to be 20,000 a month for the next 9 or 10 months, I believe him, okay? And that's a reasonable contingency. But if someone comes along and says, well, let's split the difference, forget it. I'm not going to do that. Because that is basically saying, we don't know what we're doing. And therefore, let's split the difference with the FinCom, who knows even less. So I wouldn't go below that number either.
Okay, Erwin?
Yeah, just quickly to add to what George said when he mentioned the $70 million project. We're all aware that FinCom cut an amount right at the beginning, did they not?
Well, I wouldn't blame FinCom for that. I think I'd blame our politicians who felt that it would not
Well,
pass. town meeting.
whatever caused it, we felt from the beginning that there should have been more than 70 million.
That's
So
correct,
if-
but the perception out there is that from the FinCom that we would have cut scope, and we clarified that last week. We did not cut scope, the contingency was cut.
That's correct.
So that, hopefully we cleared that misperception up in the FinCom. I don't know anywhere else, but
And I don't really want to throw that back at anybody, because in essence, we said, we're going to do the best we can to bring that project in for the budgeted amount. Okay. And that's what we're trying to do. And if it wasn't for those two items, we'd probably be pretty darn close.
so I think with where we are, I would just say that with all the points being made, one in particular in terms of compromise or, bending over because FinCom pushes back, I would just say in due respect to the town meeting, that I think we just owe the obligation within the context of our project to ask the question that we are tonight. Do we think we have more knowledge than we did a month ago, 6 months ago, 8 months ago? And I think the answer is yes. Based on that knowledge, are we comfortable enough to change what our original request was at 1.7? I think that's the only thing that really should be on the table is do we from Steve and Ken putting their numbers together and presenting what's in front of us now on the spreadsheet. It seems that the 1.35 is probably the lowest we would go. And Steve and Ken are comfortable with that burn rate of 72,000. That there is some contingency built in that. It's not a guarantee, but there's a sense that with some stuff starting to come down, we may be okay. 1.45 was where we were a month ago with an additional contingency on top of that got us to 1.7. So the question really is, and if we're ready for a motion, we'll take it. If we're still in having discussion, just keep in mind, we're just asking the question from the experts in this committee. Do we have more information that would change our position on what we need for this project? Erwin?
Yeah, I guess my question to the committee is, and from what I've heard from others, that our floor is 1.35. The question I have, do we want to ask for 1.45 in case there is some comeback saying FinCom would support something a little less than that? I don't know if it's worth doing that, but definitely it seems like the 1.35 is the floor. So I'm not sure if we should ask for 1.45 or 1.35.
I think our position should be what our position is, and I don't believe in a compromise any further than where we go tonight. Tonight has to be our final position to ensure this project's successful. So
I understand that, but if we ask for our floor, are we somehow limiting any further flexibility? I don't have the answer. I just want to know what other people think. Should we ask for one? I think we agree we should come down from the 1.7. The question is, do we come down to 1.45 or 1.35?
One other thing, if I can just interject here as the next person puts her hand up, but I would just also say, folks, that remember, we have the special town meeting in the fall. This isn't a do or die. I do think we should be taking a position as a committee that is the once and for all. But worst case scenario, if we have to go to something, we could go back to the table. Sure, there's a whole bunch of problems to go back to the table, but I think that's where some other people were thinking. But sorry for that. But did you have your hand up, Richard?
Yes, I just wanted to add that there's also another fail-safe option if all else fails, and so obviously nothing that we would want to visit, but I just want to throw it out there. There is a building maintenance stabilization fund. I don't know whether it would be this project would qualify for that. I would defer that to others. There's also a general stabilization fund. Again, these are really intended for extreme situations involving town finances, probably not something that we would want to even broach as a subject, but I just simply throw it out there as a fail-safe if all else does go awry as we move forward in this project.
But doesn't that number have to come from the proponents, namely select board? They'll have to come in and say, well, we can only get FinCom to agree to this. So we took 100,000 or 200,000 out of some stabilization fund. I don't think that ever would fly.
It would be done at the if there is a shortfall at the end of the project and we cannot finish, that's what in a that's kind of the doomsday scenario. That's what I think the parties would have to look at.
I would like to make a recommendation. And this is, see, our negotiation, before I make the recommendation, I think our negotiation has been that we came down from 1.7 and we're coming down to a number that I'm going to propose is a minimum, an absolute minimum of 1.35. That's our negotiation. So we've dropped that number by a substantial amount from what we thought it was. And that was primarily because of changes that we see happening. And that will give us, at this point, what we see as sufficient contingency to finish the project without shutting anything down. And I think that's how we ought to propose it. So I'm going to propose that we suggest that we agree that we will drop our requested number based on current information and changing information on the project to 1.35 as a minimum required amount to complete the project without any shutdowns. So that's what I'd like to propose.
So you rather do the 135 versus the 145?
Well, based on what Steve suggested, and I can believe if the numbers are coming in, I like the idea that Erwin mentioned of looking at a rolling 3-month or 4-month average. And I think based on that, it sounds like that number is coming in at around 50 to 60,000. And if it's 50 to 60,000, that should give us, based on Steve's calculations, about a $20,000 margin each month. If it's based on that, which would give us about a 10-month, 9-month, 20,000 a month is $180,000. So that's a reasonable, for the amount of money we have left and the things we have left to do, that's a reasonable contingency if we don't expect any major issues. So I would be willing to accept that 1.35 as a minimum, not to be negotiated any lower. A minimum amount, and that that would not cause any shutdown of any phase of the project.
Okay, so you have a proposal on the table. I see your hand is up, Roy, and then we'll have to find a second. You have a question, Roy?
Yeah, I do. I do. I just didn't know if you wanted to get the second first.
Yeah, go ahead.
I just, yeah, I just don't know enough about the project, but the number I think you said, Steve, was about, that gives us about 180,000 in contingency above what you're planning for, assuming the run rate stays the same. Is that accurate?
That's accurate.
And is there nothing left that doesn't sound like a lot on a project this size. I clearly understand we're getting towards the end. It just, I have to tell you that, I know it's only $100,000 more, but we just don't know what can happen. I'd like to have the flexibility. For them to want us to work with not enough flexibility, can put us right back in the same place. Now, maybe there's other savings we can find, but I really respect, George, your opinion. If I was making the decision or I was going on my own, I would want to push for the higher number. I understand there's the political implications. I can't grasp, but until FinCom has a analysis and rationale that justifies it and understands the risk, I'm not comfortable. I'm not as comfortable with 1.35 as I'd rather be at the 1.45. I just don't think it's enough.
So the proposal on the table is to vote a minimum funding required of $1,350,000. Correct, George?
That's correct. And is that essentially COVID plus the contaminated soils number?
Looks like it.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay.
Another
here's-
good reason.
Do I hear a second? Is there a second to George's proposal? We can't move forward without a second unless there's another proposal on the table.
All right, Mr. Chairman,
Yeah,
in
we
the
can-
interest of moving this discussion forward, I will second the motion.
It can still fail and we can go to another one.
That's correct. So any questions? Hearing
Well,
none.
I have a question,
Roy?
or propose to amend it. I'd like to, you suggest that, we add a little bit more and we consider, I don't know if George, we consider, moving the proposal to a nice even 1.4 million. That has us coming down $300,000.
That would be fine with me. I'd consider modifying it to that.
Do I hear a second?
Second,
Erwin, thank you. And so any questions?
Would you repeat the motion, please, as proposed to be amended?
Yes, the amendment is to move George's proposal of minimum funding of 1,350,000 to 1,400,000. With, I don't hear any questions. So,
Minimum of 140.
okay,
Let me
so I
forward.
believe we will vote the amendment first.
I do have another question.
George?
Has KBA weighed in on that number? I know it's our decision.
No, I don't think
is-
KBA has been involved in that discussion.
Are they still on the line or not?
I'm here, yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
we've not
is it
asked.
fair-
them to weigh-
Well, is
weigh
it fair to ask that question of KBA? Since they're part of our team.
Yes, I agree with Steve that I think the burn rate is going down, and I do feel that $50,000 is a pretty reasonable amount to expect from here on out. I know there are things that we don't see, but I do feel like we've hit most of the major issues now. And I do feel that it's been going down significantly lately, and I do feel it's going to trend that way, continuing.
Okay. I mean, you're always going to run into the issues like the issue of the glass that I mentioned earlier, and you're going to see things like that and you say, we can't let it go like that. We got to fix that.
Right.
Those things are going to happen, and they're probably in the $5,000 to $10,000 range.
Yeah, we're past the big stuff where we're out of the ground. We've got the curtain walls and all that stuff figured out, but there are the incidentals. But I don't see any major one big ticket item coming in, except with the exception of Hillside, of course, that could really add a lot of money to the project.
Okay, and even though Consigli doesn't have a vote, have they weighed in on any of this? Or has any of this been discussed with them? I assume some of it has.
George, this is Miles. I've been speaking with Ken almost daily over the past week or two regarding this exact spreadsheet. And kind of like Keith echoed, the biggest oddball out there, if you will, is the temp facility. We're almost done with steel. And once we get police headquarters enclosed, I think we'll feel in a much better place. But right now, the trend is about 50,000. And if you look, just for instance, look at the change order, the last 10 CRs were all really under 10 grand. So that's what we're all hoping for moving forward.
Okay, I appreciate that from both of you. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. All right, any other questions, comments? Hearing none, we will do the amendment first. So the vote to amend George's proposal to 1.4 million. We will go through the roll call.
Can we, there's a word minimum in there, right?
Correct. So your base motion, George, is minimum funding of 135. The amendment is to move that up to 1.4. So if the amendment passes, we then pass your main motion as 1.4.
the minimum.
With the word minimum in there.
Correct.
Okay,
All right. So with that said, I'll go through the roll call. Richard,
Aye.
George,
aye.
Erwin,
Aye.
Roy. Roy? Oh, sorry, I didn't hear you. Okay, thank you. Chief Schittler?
Aye.
And the chair is aye. Okay, so that passes the amendment. Now, the main motion, which has been amended to 1.4, if I'm doing this right, Richard, I will ask you to correct me if I'm wrong. But I believe that the main motion now is that George's main motion is a request for minimum funding of 1.4 million.
Correct.
Coming to the vote, roll call, Richard,
Aye.
George,
I,
Irwin,
Aye.
Roy,
Aye.
Chief Schlittler,
Aye.
chair is aye. Okay, with that said, our request is the 1.4 million. Steve, I think we'll have to update the fact sheet and probably Kate tomorrow, correct?
Yeah, if I don't think he's already done that.
if I could make one more suggestion, I think we need to also mention that the reason for us reducing our 1.7 million is because of observing the run rates coming down in the project. And that we think that this current recommendation of 1.4 has the best chance of succeeding to complete the project on time and within the budget with a minimum chance of shutting down the construction project. I think we ought to let them know that just as an addition to the suggested change.
Yes, I would, we will, George. I think got the fact thing, but I would also, I'd like to finish up something with Steve and Ken. And then I'd like to ask the committee to review. I'll send it along an email, is just if there's any other inputs. I think everybody's made the statement and it's right. We have to position it right. We're not here trying to get money for our own sake. The right understanding has to be put forth, and that is to try and position this project to be successful under the circumstances of the COVID, and certainly the big number, which was the oil and cleanup there. We need to make sure that there's sufficient contingency to run this project. So I would like to reach out to a few of you and just make sure that if there's any further input there is, and I think we do have a little bit of time, a week or so, to sort of get that through. But the next couple of days, Steve, we have to get the discussion with Kate and then also FinCom so they can go forward. Erwin, you got a hand up?
Yeah, I just want to echo what Richard said about who was really ultimately responsible for the soil contamination in the first place, that it really reverts back to the town with the underground storage, with the leakage from the operation of the fire station. I guess just to fold that into whatever facts are being presented, just as some historical context of why we had to deal with that.
Maybe what I'll do is reach out to you, George and Erwin, just tomorrow, if that's okay with you, Steve, and just see if there's any further input on what you put together. I think we can cover those topics. Okay, anything else relative to the public safety building? We've covered 3 topics: the status, the pay, and the invoices, and then this funding request. There's no other agenda item that I believe.
Just one comment. I think that even if you don't have to do this, Stuart, I assume you'd be the spokesperson for BBBC at town meeting. I think you ought to think about, if you had to make a presentation, what would it consist of? And at least give some thought to that. You'll know better whether or not you're going to have to do that based on what FinCom does between now and the end of the month. But I think you ought to think about a plan, so in case you have to implement it.
Yes, thank you, George. Yes, and I would seek part of the committee's help for that as well. This fact sheet, I think, is hopefully to preempt any level of presentation, or at least provide the insight to town meeting, not to mention FinCom and select board, but hopefully we'll get indication. I think this year's, because this year's town meeting, again, being the way it was last year in the open forum, they're hoping everybody puts their positions and enables town meeting members to get information before going to town. versus presentations at the town meeting. But George, point taken, absolutely. Okay, any other questions? All right, well, let's close down the public safety agenda item. We have another agenda item, which is the solar Jack Cogswell. So thank you, public safety team and the user group.
Take care.
Okay, in terms of the Jack Cogswell, I think that's turning over to you, Steve, right? Or is that
I
Hank?
think Hank will be presenting that.
Okay, Hank, it's all yours.
So I did send around a schedule. And let me see if I can get this up. I sent around two things previously, one of which you had seen before. And this was the analysis that Beth Greenblatt had put together. It's still valid as far as we're concerned. And it gave the best case scenario, the worst case scenario, and then a conservative scenario. We don't have any new information that would change what was previously presented there. What has happened since our last discussion was that we did receive the interconnection services agreement. It took them a lot longer to turn it around than we had anticipated. Took them 99 to over twice the length of time that they should have had, but that also gave us some waiting time. And but once they signed it and sent it back to us, it gave us until April 22nd to accept or reject it. And I'm recommending that this committee vote to accept it and the town manager sign it. And once that's signed, that gives us 120 business days in which to go through the discussions after town meeting to gain consensus on the project with select board and I suspect FinCom. We have until then October 13th, assuming we send this back on the 22nd or just prior to the 22nd. We would have until October 13th to make up our minds without having to pay anything on the first payment. The first payment you'll see over here is 1/4 of that, which is about $4,718. And that would fund the design stage for Eversource. So they'd go through their detailed design. Now, if after town meeting, and town manager had asked, could we delay this discussion until after town meeting? And Stuart, you had indicated you're intending to have a chairs meeting to discuss this topic. I think everyone's too busy prior to town meeting. So by signing and sending it back, that gives you the grace period in which to continue the discussion. If the determination is a no-go, then we can send a letter back to them and just close out the project. And the money we spent to date, we can't recuperate. And if the town decided in the future to proceed with the solar, then they'd have to restart the process with whatever program was in place at that time. The only minor thing I would add to this is if we get through this, we gain consensus, we have a go on or before the 13th of October, pay that amount. There probably would be about another $700, which I would recommend we do probably as soon as possible, which would be to apply for the SMART program. And that does have benefit. The sooner we do it, the better from a return on money point of view. Then if we proceed past that go, no go, no-go point here in October, then Eversource would prepare their documents. The town and Weston and Sampson would prepare the bid documents, go through the bidding process. And we would come at that point to another reassessment, of go, no-go based upon bids in hand. And if and then it'd come back to the committee to say, well, this is the best case scenario, the worst case scenario, or something in between. And if it's a go, then we would proceed. We'd have the second payment to make. And that would be in the $14,000 range. Plus we'd have to have spent some of the A&E fees that are tied to this. And there'd be some additional fees for the consultant. The $600,000 for construction, as you recall, in the best case scenario, we had projected somewhere around $500,000 for the construction. And the worst case scenario, we were somewhere around $700,000. So I've just shown 600 as halfway in between. And if you add all of these up, we're in the $650,000 range for the total investment to install and get through the interconnection process. Hopefully this is clear enough. We have 3 points at which we could go make a decision to go or no go. The first one, I'd encourage you to vote on tonight or to come to consensus on tonight. And Kate, I think, is prepared to sign the ISA pending your vote.
Clarification, so the go, no go is right now, if we went to October, we'd sign 4718. If after the point of October, but prior to April next year, we decide not to go, we're only out 4,718. We do not have to pay the 14,000. That's how the no goes go.
But we would be expending some A&E funds to assemble the bid documents, go out to bid.
Okay.
And probably a bit more on the for Beth Greenblatt and her company.
Okay.
I think it might be of real value to have an approximation or a budget for those numbers available as we start discussion. I'm all in favor, as most of you know, of doing this project. I definitely think we ought to vote in favor of moving forward during April and then having serious discussions among the appropriate town folks to do this between April and October. But I think we ought to have sometime in May or so, we ought to have an approximate budget for what it would cost for both the fees to the utility company plus Beth's company plus the AE firm, a total budget and when that would be spent.
Okay. Yes, I can put that together.
The other question that I had was, has any discussion taken place with Dave Davison and legal counsel as to how we would approach this project and can we take on that risk? Because I think that's the key element of moving forward is, are we willing to take on that risk? Because this
What do you
isn't
mean by
like,
risk, George?
well, the risk of finding that they're going to shut it down because they don't like the idea of taking on the risk that Eversource wants them to take on. Eversource wants the town to be held liable for this if there's any problem with their equipment. And, you know, since we use most of the electricity at Sunita Williams that we generate, it's no big deal. But in this project, we're not going to be using any more than probably a third of it. So we're essentially generating electricity that we want to get credit for from utility. And I think they're going to be a little bit more hard-nosed when it comes to what liability the town would accept.
Yeah, we would, the best benefit would be if we get the net metering rate. It is complicated in that once the site is consolidated through the land court as one site, as opposed to its current situation where it's two sites, it may be required to get a DPU waiver because we then have two installations on one site. And that could change us in terms of the economic benefit. In my initial discussion with Eversource, they had indicated that because the other facility is not owned by the town, but it's only on town, it's leased, or it's on leased land run by a separate entity.
Right.
The individual that I spoke with did not see a problem with that. Now, I don't think he reviewed it with their legal counsel, and we did not run that past DPU. So that's a red flag that we don't know the answer to yet, and would certainly be factored in before we get to this next step.
And then the question is, what does the town think of that idea of getting into the business of generating electricity with solar?
Well,
I think we still have to have that conversation. We started it, and I think there was concern that because the amount of electricity that can be generated relative to the use of the property at that point in time could be seen as a generator of electricity. But when you start to put scenarios like more cars and more vehicles within the town become electric, this actually could be, more of a usage than a generator to external sources. But I would just say that, we have some work to do to go through the discussions. And I think right now what's before us is we don't have answers, but do we have a runway to go get them? It seems to me that signing the agreement now with no cost gives us gives us a few months to work that consensus and get the understanding that of other questions before we spend $4,000 in additional monies.
Right,
Fair?
but that needs to be high on the priority list of accomplishments during that period of time. We can't wait too much longer.
I would agree, and I would seek help from, I think it is prudent to say that after town meetings when we need to start that. And I would also ask the committee and maybe a subcommittee to help run that discussion. But is there other input? Erwin, Roy, Richard? Any comments?
I would agree we move forward, and I guess Hank is recommending that we approve $700 tonight.
Yeah, to apply for the SMART program.
Yeah, I would support both those actions.
Do you realize that we're still dependent on Kate signing the ISA?
Yes.
Yes, and
Does she have any reason why she wouldn't at this point?
No, and my recent communication with her was that she was prepared to sign it, understanding that it was in essence a no cost issue, and we could reverse that decision during the next 120 business days. She did want to wait to hear what the committee consensus was before signing, and she'd sign it tomorrow if the committee says yes, please sign.
Erwin, why don't you make a motion?
That's what I was going to say. Andy.
Okay, thank you, George. I move that we approve going forward, accepting the potential for the connection from Eversource and the funding of $700 as well.
And that comes out of the contingency of the Jack Cogswell project. Do I hear a second?
I'll say a second.
Thank you, George. Any questions? Hearing, seen none, coming to a roll call. Richard,
Aye.
George,
Aye.
Irwin,
Aye.
Roy,
Aye.
chair is aye as well. Okay, great. Anything else on Jack Cogswell? I would say in the maybe the next meeting, the meeting after, I might suggest we just review that it was signed and what the status is. And I would like to ask at that time if there's, George or others would be willing to help shepherd this discussion. Because I do think there's a few things we're going to have to do relative to educating people and getting consensus and tackling some topics. Would that be an appropriate discussion point?
Sure.
Yep, certainly. And I'll put together that budget.
Okay, and Catherine, if I could ask you just to make a note that either the next meeting or the meeting after, if I'm not mistaken, we have the 27th or probably most likely the May 17th meeting, I think, because that'll be next one post town meeting. If I may ask to have that as an agenda item.
What was the agenda item?
To discuss the solar at Jack Cogswell and a subgroup to take care of the actions that are needed. Yet walking through and whether the education, whether it's trying to figure out funding, consensus building. I think we just have to talk through that. What action should we be taking?
Okay.
To move this forward would be my suggestion. So call it Jack Cogswell Solar. Next actions. Okay. All right. With that said, I think the only remaining item is the Rosemary Complex, Mike, right?
I think Mike's gone to lunch.
No, he's there.
He's back from lunch. He's at dinner now.
Mute. There we go. Now I got unmuted.
Hi, Mike. How are you?
Good, George. How are you?
Good.
Yeah, there were 2 invoices for the Rosemary Rec Complex that are on your plate.
Yep.
I had sent everybody out the agenda with what's been going on over there. So we did finish and got put in the new sensor cables. That went well, actually, better than I'd expected. And so that work's complete by Western and Sampson. That invoice is in there for approval for $1,500. And the second one was the added PRV valve, so we could reduce the pressures on the pool side that seem to be causing us some problems. And that was installed by the town's on-call plumber, which was N&T Mechanical, and that was also finished up and installed. So so both of those were done. That was $5,994 install on that. And I did send you along a budget update. So that budget update shows where we are. We actually, because of that credit that came back a little while ago from the mechanical engineer VAV that was working for BH+A, that credit went directly to our it went to BH+A's account. So what happened was we owed BH+A some money. So basically we took the credit vis-a-vis BH+A and we got a $41,000 credit back for that. So now we're somewhere around for a expected contingency right now at around $41,000. So that's what's left over in the account, and there's about another 50,000 left. Some money's left over, another 30,000 for borrowing that has not been spent yet.
If we keep this project open long enough, it'll keep growing.
We had to get it all back, so it took a little while.
Don't speak too loud. Brian.
And also, I think last time we spoke, I told you guys about the additional shelvings that are needed down in the storage room. They obviously never had enough when we moved in. So we're gonna get some prices on that. We're expecting that to be around $12,000. So that'll be the last thing. It's all allotted for in the budget spreadsheet, and we're still hovering around that $41,000 contingency.
Great. Any questions before I go to the invoices? Okay, thank you. So I'm going to put both invoices together. I'm going to put forth the invoice for N&T Mechanical Contractors to install a pressure valve, reduction valve, excuse me, coming out of the miscellaneous budget for $5,994, and the second invoice from Weston and Sampson, the lap pool wire replacement for $1,500. Do I hear a second?
Seconded.
Thank you, George. Any questions? Hearing none, coming to the roll call. Richard,
Aye.
George,
Aye.
Erwin,
Aye.
Roy,
Aye.
chair's aye. Okay, great. Anything else, Mike?
Nope, don't have anything at this time.
All right, we're getting into the swimming season soon. Oops, no, we're back down to 45 degrees.
There you go.
Saturday fooled me.
Yeah, it's fooled us all.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, Steve Popper, anything else that we need to cover?
No.
Okay,
Are we likely to have a meeting at the end of April?
but we're gonna hold it, George. I think that based on some of the various topics, like what Steve has done, he's come back. If there's nothing really, we'll cancel, but I think we should hold it.
Yep, okay. I'll keep it on my calendar. Yeah.
Hank?
Yeah, I think we're still in negotiations on the Emery Grover, as you know, and we're running into a stone wall with Finance Committee. So we might be able to update the committee at that time as to where we're going. And
There's a stone wall because they don't want to move forward on anything, on a project there.
Correct. They want to get the full financial master plan before moving forward on the project. And even though CPC has voted to approve, well, they may not have voted yet, but they have gained consensus on a path forward for their funding. FinCom is throwing it under the bus for now until they can see what the long-term plan is and what the priorities are. And I think Dan Udikance has been very clear about the priorities, that is the next priority project. But so we in the next week or two, we should have better clarification as to where their stance will be.
Okay.
Okay, great. Okay, anything more? All right, we will close out this meeting. Thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of the weekend. We will see you potentially on the 27th.
Thank you, everybody.